No one in the savannah could believe it. In a world where hyenas and lions are sworn enemies, one lone hyena crossed a line no creature had ever dared to cross. Her name was Naya, a battle-scarred scavenger known by rangers for her fierce independence and unmatched survival instincts. But one scorching afternoon, Naya did something that defied every law of nature. As the smoke from a distant wildfire rose over the golden plains, rangers spotted her carrying something fragile in her jaws. At first, they assumed it was prey, but when they looked closer, their hearts froze. It wasn't food. It was a lion cub. And then, moments later, she went back into the burning grass and came out with another. No one moved. The rivalry between hyenas and lions had lasted for centuries, a hatred etched into the heart of the wild. Yet here was a hyena risking her life, not to destroy her enemies, but to save them. She brought both cubs back to her den, nursed them as her own, and guarded them through the night. What happened next would leave scientists speechless, the internet stunned, and the world questioning everything it thought it knew about nature's balance between predator and prey. Because what unfolded in the days that followed wasn't just a story of survival, it was a story of love, defiance, and the breaking of ancient barriers. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one, true moments of compassion that remind us that nature is far more emotional, mysterious, and beautiful than we can ever imagine. The fire had started with the wind, a single spark caught in the dry grass, spreading faster than any of the rangers could have predicted. From the watchtower, the horizon glowed orange, smoke rising like a dark wall against the afternoon sky. Herds of antelope scattered, zebras stampeded, and vultures circled far above the chaos. But in the middle of all that destruction, something moved, small, quick, and completely alone. Ranger Samuel Blake raised his binoculars, adjusting the focus. "Wait," he muttered. "That's not an antelope." Beside him, his partner Mia Torres squinted toward the burning line of trees. "What is it?" Samuel's voice dropped. "It's a hyena," Mia frowned. Heading toward the fire, the creature was unmistakable. A female spotted hyena, running with desperate purpose, her coat singed and her head low. Even from a distance, they could see the scars across her muzzle, deep, old marks that told stories of countless fights. But what she carried in her jaws made both rangers freeze. It wasn't food. It was moving. "Oh my God," Mia whispered. "She's carrying a cub." They jumped into the jeep, tires tearing through the dry earth as they sped closer. The heat was suffocating, the air thick with smoke. Every gust of wind sent sparks flying, setting new patches of grass ablaze. Samuel covered his face with a cloth and shouted over the roar of the flames, "Keep your eyes on her." Through the haze, they saw the hyena disappear into a patch of unburned grass. "Did she just—" Mia started. "Wait, there." The hyena reappeared. This time, she wasn't empty-jawed. She had gone back into the fire. And now she carried another cub. Samuel slammed the brakes. She brought out two. For a few seconds, neither spoke. It didn't make sense. Hyenas and lions were natural enemies, rivals for food, water, and territory. They didn't share mercy. They shared blood. Yet here was a lone hyena, risking her life to save lion cubs that weren't her own. Mia lowered her camera slowly, her voice trembling. "She's not hurting them. Look at the way she's holding them, careful like a mother." The wind shifted, blowing hot ash into their faces. Samuel blinked through it, still watching the animal move across the field. "Where's she going? Back to her den, maybe?" He nodded. "Then we follow." By dusk, the fire had calmed, leaving a trail of blackened earth in its wake. The rangers parked the jeep near a rocky ridge, the last place they'd seen the hyena vanish. The smell of smoke lingered in the air, and the sky had turned a deep crimson. They followed her tracks, 4 strong paw prints, steady even through the soot. A few hundred yards later, they found the entrance. A narrow tunnel dug into a small mound of earth, half hidden under acacia roots. Mia crouched low, whispering. This has to be it. Samuel raised his flashlight but hesitated to turn it on. If she's inside, we don't want to scare her. A faint sound came from the darkness, a high-pitched whimper. Then another. They're alive, Mia breathed. The rangers waited in silence. The light dimmed around them, and the savannah began to hum with its nighttime chorus, crickets, distant howls, and the soft rustle of wind through grass. Then suddenly, the hyena appeared at the mouth of the den. She stood there, framed by the fading light, her eyes glowing amber. The cubs were behind her, tiny shapes moving restlessly. She didn't growl. She didn't charge. She simply looked at them, calm, unafraid. Mia whispered, "She knows we're watching." Samuel slowly lifted his camera, capturing the moment. The image would later travel the world. A hyena, once feared and misunderstood, standing protectively over two lion cubs, her body shielding them from the night. "She's not eating them," Samuel said, still disbelieving. "She's caring for them. Maybe she lost her own litter," Mia murmured. "Maybe the fire took them." The thought hung heavy in the air. The hyena, Naya, as they would later name her, turned back toward the den, disappearing inside with the cubs. One last faint sound followed, the soft rumble of her laugh, low and almost tender. The following morning, the rangers returned with fresh supplies. The air was clearer now, the savannah stretching endlessly beneath the pale blue sky. But when they reached the den, Naya was gone. Only small paw prints remained, hers and the cubs. "She moved them," Samuel said. "Smart girl. Doesn't trust us yet." They searched the area for hours until they found her again, several miles away, near a watering hole. She was lying under a tree, the two cubs tucked safely against her belly. Every few minutes, she would lick their fur or nudge them closer with her paw. The cubs purred softly. "Content, unafraid," Mia whispered. "I don't think even lions would believe this." Samuel kept filming. "They will now." He lowered the camera slowly, his voice full of quiet awe. "We spend our lives studying behavior, labeling it, predator, prey, enemy, ally. But nature doesn't care about our categories. It just feels." Mia nodded, still staring at the scene. "And today, it feels like love." The cubs squirmed, their tiny paws pressing against Naya's chest. The hyena lowered her head and let out a long, peaceful sigh. For the first time, perhaps in her entire life, she wasn't fighting. She wasn't scavenging. She was nurturing. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of grass and rain. Birds called from nearby trees. Samuel looked at Mia. "You know what this means, right? That everything we thought we knew about them might be wrong." He smiled faintly. "Exactly." They stood there for a long time, watching until the sun sank low behind the hills. As the light faded, Naya looked up one last time, her eyes meeting theirs. She didn't look away. She didn't growl, and for a single unforgettable moment, it felt like the wild itself was watching back. 3 days had passed since the fire, and the savannah was slowly recovering from the destruction. Rain had fallen overnight, cooling the cracked earth and leaving behind a faint scent of ash and new grass. For Ranger Samuel Blake and his partner Mia Torres, it was the perfect time to return to the site of the most unbelievable thing they had ever witnessed. From their vantage point high on a rocky ridge, they could see the entire valley spread before them. A vast golden sea of acacia trees, termite mounds, and wandering herds. But their eyes weren't on the horizon. They were fixed on a small patch of shrubs near a fallen tree. "That's the spot," Mia whispered, adjusting her binoculars. She moved them again. Through the glass, she spotted Naya lying in the shade, her body curled protectively around the two cubs. One was nestled against her side, sleeping soundly. The other was climbing clumsily over her back, pawing at her ear. Samuel chuckled softly. "That little one's a troublemaker." The cub tumbled off her back, landing in the dirt. For a split second it froze, staring up at Naya as if expecting punishment. But instead of snapping or growling, the hyena did something neither ranger had ever seen before. She let out a sound halfway between a chuckle and a sigh. Mia's eyes widened. "She's laughing?" Samuel lowered his binoculars slowly. "You mean that cub made her laugh?" They both stared in silence as Naya gently nudged the cub upright again with her nose, licking its dusty fur. The cub responded by letting out a tiny rumbling purr, the same sound lion mothers heard from their young. The rangers exchanged a glance that said everything. This wasn't just survival. This was affection. By midday, the heat shimmered across the plains. Samuel set up a small camouflaged camera at the edge of a bush, hidden beneath tall grass. The equipment would allow them to record Naya's behavior without disturbing her, something that could become groundbreaking evidence. This could change everything we know about interspecies care, Mia said, tapping notes into her tablet. Hyenas aren't supposed to show this kind of empathy, not toward lions at least. Empathy doesn't fit neatly into science, Samuel replied, but it fits perfectly into what we saw. Hours passed. They stayed quiet, watching through their lenses as the unusual little family went about their day. Naya hunted small rodents and scavenged bones left behind by vultures. When she returned, she regurgitated bits of meat for the cubs, a behavior reserved strictly for nurturing hyenas with their own young. At one point, a pair of jackals crept too close. The cubs froze, their small bodies trembling. Naya rose slowly, her fur bristling. The laugh that escaped her throat this time was sharp and violent, a warning that echoed across the valley. The jackals backed off instantly. When she returned to the cubs, her entire posture softened again. She nuzzled them, licking their faces as they pressed close against her. Mia whispered, "She's not pretending. She's protecting them," Samuel nodded. "And the cubs." He paused, noticing something through the binoculars. "Mia, look." The smaller cub, the one with a faint scar across its nose, was crouched low in the grass, its tail twitching. A moment later it darted forward, tackling a beetle and letting out a strange, breathy sound. "That's not a growl," Mia said slowly. "That's a laugh." They listened again. Sure enough, the cub made another high-pitched sound, short bursts that mimicked Naya's own chuckle-like calls. Samuel's eyes went wide. "It's learning her behavior." The lion cub was imitating a hyena. That evening, as the sky turned crimson, the rangers watched Naya and her adopted cubs settle for the night. The den was now surrounded by a small collection of bones, sticks, and tufts of dry grass, evidence that she'd been expanding it. The cubs crawled close, one resting its head on her paw, the other curling against her belly. The sight was tender, peaceful, but Samuel couldn't help feeling the weight of what it meant. "Do you realize what'll happen if the lions find out?" he said quietly. "If a pride catches her with their cubs," Mia finished the sentence, "they'll kill her." They both knew it was true. Lions and hyenas had warred for dominance since the beginning of time. The mere scent of one near the other's den was enough to trigger a brutal fight. If the cub's pride returned to this territory, there would be no mercy. But Naya didn't know that. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She licked the cubs clean, her eyes half closed with exhaustion. When she lay down, one cub climbed onto her neck, curling there like a scarf. The other stretched across her stomach. The last rays of sunlight caught them in a golden glow, as if nature itself had chosen to frame this impossible love. Mia's voice broke the silence. "You ever think she might have lost her own litter?" Samuel nodded slowly. "Probably. Maybe that's why she saved them. Maybe she couldn't bear to lose again." The words lingered in the cooling air. When they finally packed up for the night, the sky was velvet black, studded with stars. Samuel looked back one last time. From the den came a faint rhythmic sound, 2 tiny whimpers followed by Naya's low, rolling laugh. He smiled softly. "That cub really does laugh," Mia grinned. "Then maybe it's not a cub anymore. Maybe it's her child now." Later that night, as they drove back to camp, Samuel uploaded the footage to his laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing frame after frame of the hyena and her 2 adopted cubs. One clip stood out, the moment when the smallest cub pressed its face into Naya's fur and made that awkward, half-laughing sound again. Naya looked down at it, then lifted her head to the sky and let out her own deep, echoing call. A hyena's laugh, but slower, gentler, full of something almost human. Mia leaned over his shoulder, whispering, "She's teaching them to laugh at life, not fear it." Samuel smiled faintly, closing the laptop. "And maybe that's the most powerful lesson any mother can teach." Outside, a distant chorus of howls echoed across the plains, hyenas calling to one another beneath the stars. And somewhere among them Naya's laugh rose and fell, softer than the rest, followed by two tiny voices trying to join in. The dry season had begun to settle over the savannah. The grass turned brittle, the wind carried dust instead of rain, and every animal grew leaner, hungrier. For Naya it meant longer hunts and fewer scavenged meals. But for the lion cubs, now stronger and faster than before, it meant curiosity, too much curiosity. From their hidden vantage point behind a patch of thorn bushes, Ranger Samuel Blake and his partner, Mia Torres, watched as the cubs wrestled outside the den, tumbling over each other in a cloud of dust. Naya lay nearby, her eyes half closed, pretending not to notice. "They're growing fast," Mia whispered. "They've doubled in size since last week," Samuel nodded. "Yeah, but they're starting to act like lions. Look at the way they pounce. Head first, no patience." He smiled faintly, though his tone carried worry. Every day, the cubs became a little more lion and a little less hyena. They were learning her calls, yes, but also her limits. They'd begun to wander farther from the den, chasing beetles, sniffing bones, venturing close to the trees where other predators sometimes hid. "Instinct's a powerful thing," Mia said. "No matter how much she loves them, she can't change what they are." Samuel lowered his binoculars. "Maybe not, but she's trying." He didn't know that in just a few hours, nature would test that love in a way no one could have predicted. By noon, the air shimmered with heat. The usual calls of birds and insects had gone quiet. The cubs stopped playing and lifted their heads, ears twitching. Even Naya stood suddenly, muscles stiff, nose raised to the wind. Mia frowned. "What's wrong?" Samuel's voice dropped. "Listen." In the distance, faint but unmistakable, came the low rumble of lion roars. "Oh no." Mia breathed. "The pride. They're back." Through the long lens of her camera, she spotted them, 5 lions moving across the ridge, 2 females, a male, and 2 sub-adults. The alpha female led the way, her golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. She was enormous, strong, regal, and unmistakably dominant. Samuel swore under his breath. "If they pick up the cubs' scent, they'll kill her," Mia finished grimly. "And maybe the cubs too." Naya was already moving. She nudged the cubs back toward the den, urging them inside with quick, sharp grunts. The smaller cub obeyed immediately. The larger one hesitated, confused by her sudden panic. "Go," Samuel whispered under his breath, as if the cub could hear him. "Go, little one." But before it could move, a deep roar shook the valley. The lions had reached the hill opposite the den. The alpha female froze mid-step, head tilted. Her nostrils flared. "She's got their scent," Mia whispered. Naya's ears flattened. The cubs pressed against her legs, trembling. And then, like a mother pushed past fear, she did something neither ranger would ever forget. She stepped out. Under the merciless afternoon sun, one lone hyena faced 5 lions. Dust blew across the cracked earth. The air itself seemed to stop moving. The lions spread out in a half circle, their tails twitching. The alpha female's golden eyes locked on Naya's face. Recognition flickered there, the look of a predator meeting an old rival. Naya lowered her head, but didn't back away. Her body shook with adrenaline, yet her stance was firm. Behind her, the cubs whimpered from inside the den. The alpha female growled. Taking a step forward, Mia held her breath. "She's done for." "Wait," Samuel said. "She's not running." Naya's jaws opened, not to snarl but to laugh. It was a deep rolling sound, strange and defiant. Every hair on the lions' backs rose. Hyenas used that call to communicate confidence, dominance, warning. But this laugh carried something else. Grief, maybe. Or courage. The alpha growled louder, her tail lashing. Naya responded with another laugh, louder this time. Then she lunged forward, not to attack, but to distract. Dust exploded beneath her paws. The lions roared and charged. Naya darted sideways, snapping at the flanks of the nearest sub-adult. The cubs inside the den squealed. "She's trying to draw them away." Samuel shouted. Mia gripped the binoculars tighter. "She's sacrificing herself." The lions chased her through the grass, their massive bodies pounding the earth. But Naya was faster. She zigzagged through thorn bushes, leading them farther from the den with every stride. When one lion tried to cut her off, she turned sharply, letting out a manic laugh that echoed across the plains. Samuel couldn't tear his eyes away. "She's leading them straight toward the ravine." Mia exhaled, realizing what that meant. The ravine's cliffs were steep, too steep for lions. But Naya had lived here her whole life. She knew every rock, every escape route. The chase stretched on until the heat shimmered with their movements. Then at the edge of the ravine, Naya stopped and turned. The alpha lioness charged. Naya waited until the last second, then sidestepped. The lioness skidded, dirt flying, and barely stopped before the drop. Naya stood a few feet away, panting, her fur torn, her sides heaving. For a heartbeat, predator and prey stared at each other. Then, almost impossibly, Naya laughed again. The sound carried across the canyon, echoing through the rocks, rolling like thunder. The lioness stared for a long moment, then turned back toward her pride. The others followed her lead. One by one, they vanished over the ridge. When Naya finally limped back to the den hours later, she was covered in cuts and dust. The cubs ran to her instantly, pressing their small bodies against her chest. She lay down, too weak to stand, and licked their heads one by one. From a distance, the rangers watched silently. Neither spoke. Mia wiped her eyes. She faced 5 lions. For them, Samuel nodded, his voice rough. "She's the bravest mother I've ever seen." They stayed until the stars began to appear, the savannah glowing silver under the moonlight. Inside the den, the cubs slept curled against Naya's belly. Every now and then, her chest rose and fell sharply, pain from her wounds, but she never moved away from them. Her laugh, when it finally came, was quiet and shaky. But it was real, Mia whispered softly, almost to herself. "They'll never believe this back at the station." Samuel smiled faintly. "They don't have to." She didn't do it to be believed. He looked out over the dark plains where the lions' silhouettes had disappeared. She did it because love doesn't care about species, rules, or fear. It just is. And from the den came the faintest sound of cubs stirring, followed by a single, tired, beautiful laugh that rolled out into the night. Weeks passed, and the savannah began to change again. The rains returned, breathing life into the cracked earth. Streams that had run dry now shimmered in the sunlight, and the smell of wet soil filled the air. New grass pushed through the ashes left by the wildfire that had once destroyed everything. And, ironically, it was that same fire that had brought this strange family together. From a distance, Ranger Samuel Blake adjusted his camera, zooming in on the small clearing near the acacia trees. "They're bigger," he said quietly. Mia Torres smiled beside him, the binoculars pressed to her face. "Much bigger and bolder." Below them, the 2 lion cubs chased each other through the tall grass. Their paws thudded softly on the wet ground, their little tails flicking like metronomes. But there was something different about the way they moved. Their steps were lighter, quicker, more cautious. They moved like hyenas, and watching from the shade, as always, was Naya. Her fur had grown patchy from old wounds, and one ear was permanently scarred from the lion fight weeks earlier. But her eyes still burned, with that same fierce, protective glow. She followed every movement of her cubs, no, her children, with quiet vigilance. "They hunt like her," Mia whispered, lowering the binoculars. "Not like lions," Samuel nodded. "It's incredible. Their instincts are splitting between 2 worlds. That afternoon, a sudden commotion drew their attention. A family of warthogs had wandered too close to Naya's territory. Normally, a lion cub would hide, waiting for its mother to make the first move. But Naya's cubs didn't hide. The smaller cub crouched low in the grass, just as it had seen Naya do countless times before. The larger one followed its lead, creeping silently through the wet blades. Their golden coats blended perfectly with the ground. Samuel leaned forward. "You've got to be kidding me." The cubs were stalking the warthogs. Mia raised her camera, holding her breath. The cubs advanced with astonishing precision, stopping every few seconds, their eyes locked on the smallest warthog in the group. The air was thick with tension. Then all at once, the smaller cub leapt. It missed. The warthogs squealed and scattered, kicking up clods of mud as they ran. The cubs tumbled into the dirt, growling playfully at each other, while Naya rose to her feet and trotted over. Instead of scolding them, she sniffed their faces and let out a soft, rumbling laugh, the sound of approval. She then crouched down and demonstrated the move herself, sliding silently through the grass before pouncing on a half-buried bone. The cubs watched intently. "She's teaching them," Mia said, astonished. "She's teaching lions how to hunt like hyenas." Samuel smiled faintly. "She's rewriting evolution." By nightfall, the cubs were exhausted. They curled up near the den, while Naya sat on a small rise overlooking the plains. The moonlight cast her silhouette in silver, her laugh echoing softly in the distance. The rangers sat in their observation tent a few hundred yards away, reviewing the footage. The videos were unbelievable. Moments of tenderness, play, and survival that defied everything they'd learned in wildlife school. But Mia wasn't smiling this time. She turned to Samuel. "We need to talk about what happens next." Samuel frowned. "What do you mean?" "You know as well as I do this can't last forever. Those cubs are growing. They're going to get stronger, hungrier, and one day they'll go looking for others like them." Samuel exhaled slowly. "And if they find lions, they'll be torn apart," she finished. "The pride won't recognize them, and the hyenas won't either. They don't belong to any world now." Silence settled between them. Outside, the night was alive with sound, the croak of frogs, the distant howl of jackals, the soft rhythm of rain tapping on the tent roof. "Finally," Samuel said quietly, "if we interfere, we risk destroying what's natural. But if we don't," Mia nodded, "we might be letting them walk into tragedy." Neither spoke again for a long time. The next morning, they drove closer to the den, staying downwind to avoid being detected. The cubs were out playing again, but something was different this time. They were growling, low, guttural sounds that made both rangers freeze. Two wild hyenas had approached from the west, drawn by curiosity. They stopped a few yards from Naya's den, sniffing the air, their heads tilted in confusion. They could smell lion, but also their own kind. Naya appeared instantly, her laugh cutting through the morning air. Samuel whispered, "This could get ugly." The strangers circled her cautiously. One barked, issuing a challenge. Naya stood her ground. Behind her, the cubs whimpered, but didn't retreat. Mia gripped Samuel's arm. "Look at that." The cubs had crouched down beside Naya, mimicking her defensive stance perfectly. The smaller one even tried to make the same laughing call, its voice high and shaky, but unmistakable. Samuel's eyes widened. "They're defending the den." The two intruders hesitated, clearly unsure what they were seeing. One growled softly, but then both turned and loped away, vanishing into the tall grass. When they were gone, Naya collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily. The cubs ran to her side, rubbing their heads against her chest. "She's exhausted," Mia whispered. "Yeah," Samuel said softly, but she won again. That evening, as the sky turned a deep purple, the rangers packed up their gear. Mia closed her notebook, her expression somber. "You ever wonder if we're supposed to step in? Maybe relocate them before it's too late?" Samuel looked out toward the horizon. "Maybe, but if we move them, what do we tell the world? That we rescued lions from a hyena's love? That we decided nature made a mistake?" Mia didn't answer. Out in the distance, Naya stood on her favorite rock, her body silhouetted against the setting sun. The cubs stood beside her now, taller, stronger, but still leaning against her for comfort. Together, they looked less like enemies of nature and more like symbols of something bigger than biology. "She doesn't see species," Samuel said quietly. "She just sees family," Mia exhaled slowly. "And maybe that's what makes her more human than we are." As the last light faded, Naya lifted her head to the heavens and let out her haunting laugh. This time, two smaller voices joined her. The sound wasn't perfect, it was uneven, broken, but it was beautiful, and under that strange echoing chorus, even the rangers couldn't help but smile. It began with a single clip, 30 seconds of footage recorded from the rangers' hidden camera. Naya lying in the golden grass, licking the two lion cubs clean while one of them laughed. That strange, beautiful imitation of her own sound. Mia uploaded it privately to share with a wildlife research group, never intending for it to spread beyond the scientific circle. But within days, it escaped. And once it did, the world could not look away. Millions watched in disbelief. The comments poured in, "Is this real? This breaks the laws of nature. She's proof that love exists even in the wild." News networks picked up the story. Documentaries called her the hyena who became a mother of lions. Environmental groups sent messages demanding the cubs be rescued, while others insisted they be left free. What had once been a quiet miracle, known only to two rangers, became a global debate. For Samuel and Mia, it was chaos. Their once secluded observation post was now surrounded by journalists, researchers, and drones hovering above the plains. Mia slammed her radio down one morning. "They're turning her life into a circus." Samuel sat quietly at the small camp table, scrolling through headlines on his phone. "They mean well," he said, though his tone betrayed exhaustion. "Everyone wants to save them." "Save them from what?" she shot back. "From love, from each other." Outside, the wind carried faint echoes, Naya's laugh and the cubs' playful growls. The sound had once filled them with joy. Now it just reminded them how fragile the peace had become. By the following week, a conservation task force had arrived. They set up camp near the reserve border, carrying tranquilizer rifles, nets, and transport cages. Their goal was clear: relocate the cubs before they grew too wild and before the lions returned. Samuel argued, pleaded even, but the orders came from higher up. "Public pressure," the senior officer said. "People want a happy ending. We can't risk tragedy on camera." That night, Samuel and Mia sat by the fire in silence. The moon hung low and red, the air heavy with the scent of rain. Mia broke the silence first. "If they take the cubs, they'll never survive without her." Samuel nodded. "And if they leave them, the lions will kill them." "Then what's the right thing to do?" He stared into the flames. "Maybe there isn't one." At dawn, the trucks rolled in. The rangers followed behind, hearts pounding. As the convoy approached Naya's den, Samuel's throat tightened. She was there, standing on her rock as she always did, her fur glistening with dew. The cubs played near her feet, unaware of what was coming. When the first engine roared, she froze. Her ears twitched and she sniffed the air. Then she saw them and the strangers, the metal, the guns. She growled, not in rage, but in fear. The cubs pressed against her legs, confused. Mia whispered from the jeep, "Please, don't run. Don't make them chase you." But Naya had never known submission. With a sudden burst of energy, she nudged the cubs toward the tall grass and bolted. The task force shouted orders. Tranquilizer darts hissed through the air. Samuel jumped from the jeep, ignoring protocol. "Wait! You'll scare her into the lion's territory!" No one listened. He ran after them, his boots pounding the earth. Through the thick brush, he caught glimpses of movement, golden fur, spotted legs, flashes of white. Then, in the clearing ahead, he saw them. Naya stood between her cubs and the approaching men, her body trembling, her eyes wide. She could smell the sedative in the air, hear the metallic click of weapons behind the trees. She didn't laugh this time, she just stared. For a long moment, everything was still. Samuel stepped forward slowly, hands raised. "It's okay, girl," he said softly. "No one's going to hurt you." He knew it was a lie, a dart fired. It struck her shoulder. Naya jerked, stumbled, and turned. The cubs squealed. She tried to run, but her legs gave out after only a few steps. She collapsed in the grass, her chest heaving. The cubs circled her, nudging her face, whining. Mia arrived seconds later, falling to her knees beside Samuel. "No, no, no!" Samuel's voice broke. They sedated her too hard. He reached out, brushing his hand over Naya's fur. Her eyes flickered open for a moment. She looked at him, really looked. And then, with one last breath, she laughed. It was faint, broken, but unmistakable, and then it stopped. Hours later, the cubs were carried into transport cages. They didn't resist. They just stared out through the bars, their small faces pressed against the cold metal. One of them let out a soft sound. Not a roar, not a whimper. It was a laugh. Samuel turned away, tears in his eyes. When the truck doors closed, the savannah fell silent. A month later, the footage aired worldwide. It showed everything. The rescue, the relationship, the impossible bond between predator and prey. Documentaries called it the laugh of life. Poets wrote about it. Schools played it in classrooms. The cubs were transferred to a protected reserve. They grew healthy, strong, but never fully lion. Their calls carried something unique, a hybrid rhythm, a sound no scientist could categorize. They laughed when they played. They laughed when they hunted, and every time they did, the rangers who heard it felt a piece of Naya still echoing through the plains. Months later, Samuel and Mia returned to the place where it all began. The den was empty now, overgrown with grass and wildflowers. The air was quiet, except for the hum of distant insects. Mia knelt by a small mound of earth near the rock. "She's still here," she whispered. Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "She'll always be here, and so will they." He pulled out a small plaque from his bag and laid it gently against the stone. The engraving read, "Naya, the hyena who taught the world to love beyond fear." They stood in silence as the wind moved through the grass, carrying faint echoes across the open land. Somewhere in the distance, two young lions played, their laughter rising above the rustling leaves. Mia smiled through tears. "Do you hear that?" Samuel nodded. "She taught them well." The sky burned gold as the sun began to set, the savannah glowing with life and memory. And for a brief, perfect moment, Samuel thought he heard her again, that rolling, joyous laugh that once defied nature itself. But maybe it wasn't an echo. Maybe it was the world laughing back.